Danny Cole had been alone on 4 for 11 days when he heard the screaming. It was not a human sound. It was high and sharp and full of terror, cutting through the thick jungle air like a blade. He stopped walking and listened. The sound came again, somewhere to the east, beyond the wall of purple trees and hanging vines that blocked his view. He was a geological surveyor, not a soldier. His job was simple. He collected soil samples, mapped mineral deposits, and sent reports back to the human colony 40 kilometers south. His partner had been evacuated a week ago due to illness, leaving Danny to work the wetland region alone. The colony leadership had promised a replacement, but none had arrived. Danny did not mind the solitude. He had spent 3 years on frontier worlds, and he had learned to enjoy his own company. But that sound troubled him. It was desperate, it was afraid, and it was coming from the direction of the sacred lands. They were the native species of this jungle moon. They were tall and scaled, with 4 arms and skin that glowed with bioluminescent patterns. They were also hostile to humans. 3 survey teams had been attacked in the past month. 2 people had died. The colony had issued strict warnings to stay away from territory, and the sacred wetlands were the most dangerous place of all. Danny knew he should turn around. He knew he should walk back to his camp, file his samples, and forget what he heard. That would be the smart thing to do. That would be the safe thing to do. The screaming came again, weaker now, and Danny started running toward it. He pushed through the dense foliage, his boots sinking into the soft ground with every step. The air was thick with moisture and the smell of rotting vegetation. Insects buzzed around his head. Sweat poured down his face. He did not stop. He followed the sound until he burst through a wall of ferns and found himself at the edge of a clearing. The quicksand pit was wide and dark, a pool of mud that looked almost black in the dim jungle light. And in the center of that pit, sinking slowly but steadily, was a female. She was young, Danny realized. Not a child, but not fully grown either. Her 4 arms thrashed against the thick mud, but every movement only pulled her deeper. The mud was up to her chest now, and her bioluminescent markings were flashing in wild, panic patterns. She saw Danny and froze. Her golden eyes went wide with shock. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Danny stared at the alien. The alien stared at Danny. The only sound was the wet sucking of the quicksand as it continued its slow, hungry work. Danny had a choice to make. He could walk away. No one would ever know. They had killed humans. They had attacked his people without warning or mercy. This female was probably related to one of those warriors. She might even be the daughter of someone who had ordered those attacks. If he saved her and her people found out, they might hunt him down and kill him for trespassing on sacred ground. But she was dying. Right in front of him, she was dying, and Danny could not watch that happen. He dropped his pack and his equipment on solid ground. He pulled off his jacket and moved toward the edge of the pit, testing each step carefully. The ground was soft but stable near the edges. He got as close as he dared and then lay flat on his stomach, spreading his weight across the surface. The female watched him with those huge golden eyes. She had stopped struggling, perhaps understanding that movement only made things worse. She was smart, Danny realized. Even in her terror, she was paying attention. He extended his jacket toward her, holding one sleeve while offering her the body of the garment. She looked at it with confusion. Of course, she did not understand. Her people did not wear clothing like this. She had no idea what he wanted her to do. Danny tried to remember the phrases he had learned from the colony database. His pronunciation was terrible, but he had to try. He pointed at the jacket, then mimed grabbing it with his hands. He pulled back, showing her the motion he needed her to make. Understanding flickered in her eyes. She reached out with 2 of her 4 arms and grabbed the jacket. Her grip was strong, stronger than Danny had expected. He braced himself and pulled. The quicksand did not want to let her go. It held her with a grip that seemed almost alive, almost hungry. Danny pulled harder, his arms burning with the effort, his shoulders screaming in protest. The mud made a horrible sucking sound as it fought to keep its prey. But Danny did not stop. He could not stop. He pulled and pulled inch by inch, dragging the alien female towards solid ground. His muscles ached. His hands cramped around the jacket's sleeve. Sweat blinded him. He kept pulling. And then with a final wet pop, she came free. They collapsed together on the solid ground, both of them gasping for air and covered in thick black mud. Danny lay on his back, staring up at the purple canopy above, his chest heaving with exhaustion. Beside him, the female lay in a similar position, her forearms spread wide, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm. For a long time, neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say. They were enemies who had just saved each other from something worse than war. Finally, the female sat up. She looked at Danny with an expression he could not read. Then she touched her chest with one hand and spoke a single word. Yes. Danny understood. He sat up slowly, his body protesting every movement. He pointed to himself. Danny. She repeated the name awkwardly, her mouth not quite shaped for human sounds. Dan, close enough. They looked at each other for another long moment. Two strangers from two worlds, covered in mud and breathing hard, alive when they should not be. Danny did not know what would happen next. He did not know if her people would thank him or kill him for what he had done. But right now, in this moment, none of that mattered. He had done the right thing. Whatever came next, he could live with that. Thence markings began to pulse in a new pattern, bright and rhythmic, like a beacon. Danny recognized it from the colony reports. She was signaling her location. Her people were coming. Danny looked at the jungle around them, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. He should run. He should get as far away from here as possible before the warriors arrived. But grabbed his arm with gentle firmness and shook her head. Her golden eyes held his, and in them he saw something that might have been gratitude or might have been warning. Stay, those eyes seemed to say. Trust me. Danny did not move. He sat beside the alien female he had just saved and waited for her people to find them. He had no idea what he was walking into, but he had made his choice. Now he would see it through. The jungle around them began to rustle with movement, and Danny Cole prepared to meet the consequences of his compassion. The warriors emerged from the jungle like ghosts. One moment there was nothing but trees and shadows. The next moment there were 30 of them, tall and scaled and armed with spears that gleamed in the dim light. Their bioluminescent markings blazed with angry red patterns that Danny had learned to associate with aggression. Danny stayed very still. He kept his hands visible and his movements slow. Beside him, rose to her feet and began speaking rapidly in her native language. Her tone was urgent, almost pleading. The warriors did not lower their weapons. They formed a circle around Danny, and their golden eyes fixed on the human with cold hostility. Danny could feel their hatred like a physical weight pressing down on him. These were the same beings who had killed 2 of his colleagues. They had every reason to want him dead. Then the circle parted, and the largest Danny had ever seen stepped through. He was a head taller than the others, and his 4 arms were thick with muscle. His scales were darker than the rest, almost black in places, and his bioluminescent markings were more complex and elaborate. He wore ornaments of bone and metal around his neck and wrists. Everything about him spoke of power and authority. This was the chief. This was father. He looked at his daughter first, taking in the mud that covered her body and the exhaustion that showed in her posture. Something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been relief or fear or both. Then he looked at Danny and the flickering stopped. His gaze became hard and cold. Stepped between them, speaking quickly. She gestured at the quicksand pit, at Danny, at herself. She was telling the story of what had happened, Danny realized. She was trying to explain. The chief listened without expression. When finished, he asked a question. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. Answered. He asked another question. She answered again. The other warriors watched in silence, their spears still raised, their bodies tense and ready for violence. Danny understood none of the words, but he understood the situation perfectly. His life was being debated. His fate was being decided. And there was nothing he could do but wait. The chief turned to his warriors and spoke. Several of them responded, their voices angry and demanding. They pointed at Danny with their spears. They made gestures that clearly meant violence. They wanted blood. They wanted revenge for their fallen brothers and sisters. They wanted this human to pay for the crimes of his species. But spoke again, louder this time, her voice carrying a note of command that surprised Danny. The warriors fell silent. Even the chief seemed taken aback by her tone. She walked to Danny and stood beside him, her 4 arms crossed over her chest in a gesture of defiance. The chief studied his daughter for a long moment. Then he asked her a question, and his voice was softer now, almost gentle. Answered with a single word, and Danny recognized it. She had said his name, Dan. The chief approached Danny slowly, his massive form blocking out the jungle light. Danny forced himself to stand straight, to meet those golden eyes without flinching. If he was going to die, he would die on his feet. But the chief did not kill him. Instead, he spoke in heavily accented but understandable human words. "Why did you save her?" Danny blinked in surprise. He had not expected the chief to speak his language. He had not expected a question instead of a blade. The warriors watched. The entire jungle seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Danny's answer. He could lie. He could claim he had hoped for a reward, or that he had wanted to create an advantage for his people. He could say anything that might make sense to these aliens, anything that might save his life. But Danny was tired of lies. He was tired of the games that humans had been playing since first contact. He decided to tell the truth. "Because she was dying," he said. "Because I could help. Because walking away would have made me something less than human." The chief studied him for a long moment, his golden eyes searching Danny's face for any sign of deception. Danny did not look away. He had nothing to hide. Finally, the chief spoke again. "You risked your life for an enemy. You trespassed on sacred ground to save a stranger. This is not what we have seen from humans before." "Maybe you have not been looking at the right humans," Danny replied. The chief made a sound that might have been a laugh. It was hard to tell with an alien face. Then he reached up and removed one of the bone ornaments from around his neck. He held it out to Danny. "Take this," he said. "It marks you as one who has earned the gratitude of my clan. Any who sees it will know that you are not to be harmed." Danny took the ornament carefully. It was warm to the touch, and he could feel faint vibrations coming from within it. The bone was carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move in the dim light. "What is your name?" Danny asked. "I am," the chief replied. "And the life you saved is my daughter, the voice of our ancestors. Her death would have been a wound our people might never have healed. You have given us a great gift, human. We do not forget such things." Turned to his warriors and spoke in his own language. The anger drained from their faces, replaced by something more complex. They lowered their spears. They stepped back, creating an opening in the circle. "Go now," said to Danny. "Return to your camp, but know this. We will speak again, you and I. There is much to discuss." Danny nodded. He looked at who was watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Gratitude, perhaps, or curiosity, or something else entirely. "Thank you," he said to her, "for speaking for me." She did not answer with words. Instead, she pressed one of her 4 hands against her chest, where Danny assumed her heart would be, and then extended it toward him. The gesture was clear enough. Whatever she felt, it came from a deep place. Danny returned the gesture as best he could with his 2 human hands. Then he turned and walked through the gap in the circle of warriors. He collected his pack and his equipment from where he had dropped them. He did not look back. The jungle swallowed him within moments, and he walked through the green shadows with his mind racing. He had come to this moon to dig in the dirt and file reports. He had never expected to save an alien life. He had never expected to meet a chief or receive a gift that might change everything. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know if his promise of protection would hold, or if the more hostile warriors would seek revenge despite their chief's words. But he knew one thing for certain. Something had changed today. Something had shifted in the relationship between humans and Danny Cole, a simple surveyor from a frontier world, was right in the middle of it. He walked back to his camp as the jungle darkened around him, the bone ornament warm against his chest, and wondered what the coming days would bring. 5 days passed in silence. Danny continued his work, collecting samples and mapping the terrain, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about the bone ornament that he now wore around his neck, about the promise of future conversation that the chief had made. He did not tell the colony what had happened. He was not sure how to explain it. He was not sure they would believe him. The relationship between humans had been nothing but violence and suspicion since first contact. The idea that a human had saved an alien life and been thanked for it would sound like fantasy. So Danny kept quiet and waited to see what would happen next. On the morning of the 6th day, he woke to find his camp surrounded. They had arrived in the night, moving through the jungle with a silence that still amazed Danny. There were 30 of them, perhaps more, arranged in a formal pattern around his small shelter. They wore ceremonial paint on their scales, and their bioluminescent markings glowed with soft golden light instead of the angry red he had seen before. Stood at the center of the formation, and beside him she was transformed. Her scales had been painted with elaborate patterns that shimmered like liquid metal. Golden ornaments hung from her forearms and wrapped around her neck. She looked like royalty. She looked like something sacred. Danny emerged from his shelter slowly, his hands visible and his movements careful. The warriors did not reach for their weapons. They simply watched him with those golden eyes, waiting. Stepped forward. His voice was formal and ceremonial when he spoke. Danny Cole of the human people, we have come to speak with you on a matter of great importance. Will you hear us? Danny nodded. I will hear you. Gestured, and two warriors brought forward a small platform carved from dark wood. They set it on the ground between Danny and the chief. It was a place for negotiation, Danny realized. A place for formal discussion between equals. 5 days ago, began, you saved the life of my daughter. You risked your own safety to pull her from the mud that would have claimed her. You did this knowing that our peoples are enemies. You did this knowing that you might be killed for trespassing on sacred ground. We have spent these 5 days discussing what your actions mean and how we should respond. Danny waited. He could feel the weight of the moment, the importance of whatever was about to be said. Among my people, continued, there is no greater virtue than courage in service of others. A warrior who risks himself for his clan is honored. A hunter who shares his catch with the hungry is praised. But these are expected behaviors. They are what our society demands. What you did was different. You had no obligation to save my daughter. You had every reason to let her die. And yet you chose to help her anyway. Stepped forward now, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of ritual and tradition. I am the voice of our ancestors. It is my duty to interpret the signs and omens that guide our people. When I was drowning in the sacred pit, I cried out to the spirits for help, and they sent me a human. She looked at Danny with those golden eyes, and he saw something new in them. Respect, perhaps, or wonder. The spirits have spoken, she said. Your actions carry meaning beyond the simple saving of a life. You are a bridge between our worlds, Danny Cole. The ancestors have chosen you for a purpose we do not yet fully understand. Danny did not know what to say. He was a surveyor, not a diplomat. He was a man who dug in the dirt, not a bridge between civilizations. But he could see that these aliens believed what they were saying. To them, this was not politics or strategy. This was something spiritual and profound. Spoke again. We wish to offer you a gift, Danny Cole. A status that has never been given to an outsider in all the history of our people. We wish to make you clan friend. The warriors around them shifted, and Danny sensed the significance of the moment. This was not a small thing. This was something that would change everything. What does that mean? Danny asked. It means that you would be under the protection of our entire clan. You could travel our lands freely. You could trade with our people and speak at our councils. Your enemies would be our enemies. Your safety would be our responsibility. Paused, and his voice grew heavier. It also means that you would have obligations to us. You would be expected to teach us about your people. You would help us understand the humans who came from the sky. And if conflict came between your species and ours, you would work to prevent bloodshed rather than encourage it. Danny thought about the colony leadership, about their plans for expansion and their talk of military action against the. He thought about what it would mean to stand between his own people and these aliens. This is not a small thing you are asking, he said. No, agreed. It is not. We are asking you to be something more than what you are. We are asking you to be a bridge. Danny looked at, who was watching him with quiet intensity. He looked at the warriors around him, their golden eyes reflecting the morning light. He looked at the chief who had every reason to hate humans but had chosen another path instead. He thought about why he had saved in the first place. He had done it because it was right. He had done it because walking away would have made him less than human. Now he was being asked to take that choice further, to commit to something larger than himself. It was terrifying. It was also exactly what humanity needed, even if they did not know it yet. I accept, Danny said. I will be your clan friend. I will try to be the bridge you are looking for. Smiled, a strange expression on an alien face, but unmistakably warm. He stepped forward and clasped Danny's shoulder with one of his 4 hands. Then let us begin, the chief said. There is much work to do. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything Danny had ever experienced. They painted his skin with bioluminescent pigments that glowed softly in the morning light. They chanted in their native language, words that Danny did not understand but felt deep in his bones. They gave him gifts of carved bone and woven fabric, symbols of his new status among their people. When it was over, Danny stood among the knot as a stranger or an enemy, but as something new, something that had never existed before. Then his communication device crackled to life, and the voice of Greg Palmer, the colony administrator, shattered the moment. "Cole, this is Command. Our satellites show you surrounded by hostiles. What the hell is happening out there? Respond immediately." Danny looked at the around him, at end, and the warriors who had just accepted him as one of their own. He looked at the device in his hand, connecting him to a world that might not understand what had happened here. He took a deep breath and pressed the transmit button. "Command, this is Cole. I am not in danger. I repeat, I am not in danger, but we need to talk. Something has changed out here and you need to hear about it." The silence that followed was heavy with uncertainty, and Danny knew that the hardest part of being a bridge was still to come. The colony administrator's voice crackled through the communication device, sharp with suspicion and fear. "Cole, I am sending extraction teams to your location. Do not engage with the hostiles. I repeat, do not engage. Stay where you are and wait for backup." Danny looked at who was watching him with calm understanding. The chief did not speak human language as well, but he understood the tone. He understood that trouble was coming. "Command, you need to listen to me," Danny said. "If you send armed soldiers out here, people will die on both sides. These are not hostiles. They are offering peace. Real peace." "Peace?" Palmer's laugh was bitter and cold. "Cole, those things killed 2 of our people last month. They have attacked every survey team we have sent into that region, and now you are telling me they want peace." "Things have changed," Danny said. "I saved the life of the chief's daughter. They consider me a friend now. They want to talk." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Danny could imagine Palmer's face, the suspicion and confusion warring with the practical concerns of leadership. "How do I know this is not a trap?" Palmer finally asked. "How do I know they are not using you to lure our people into an ambush?" Danny looked at who had moved to stand beside her father. Her golden eyes were fixed on Danny, and in them he saw the same question reflected back at him. How could 2 peoples who had only known violence learn to trust each other? "You do not know," Danny admitted. "You have no reason to trust them and they have no reason to trust you. That is why I am standing here right now. That is why they came to me instead of attacking the colony directly. They are taking a risk too, Palmer. They are trying something new." Another pause. Then Palmer's voice came back harder now. "I am dispatching a shuttle with a security team. They will land 2 kilometers from your position and approach on foot. If what you are saying is true, then we will talk. But if this is a trap, Cole, if you have been compromised somehow, we will respond with force." The line went dead before Danny could respond. He turned to and spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. "My people are coming, armed soldiers. They are afraid of you. If they see your warriors with weapons, they will attack." Nodded slowly. He had expected this. He had known that building a bridge would not be easy. "What do you suggest?" the chief asked. Danny thought for a moment. "We need to show them something they do not expect. We need to show them that we are not enemies." Spoke up, her voice thoughtful. "Among our people, when 2 clans wish to end a conflict, the chiefs meet alone. They leave their warriors behind and face each other with nothing but their words. It is a sign of trust." Danny nodded. "That could work. If meets with Palmer directly, just the 2 of them, it would show that we are serious about peace." Considered this. Danny could see the risk calculation happening behind those golden eyes. If the chief walked into a meeting with armed humans and they decided to kill him, they would lose their leader. The clan would be thrown into chaos, and any chance of peace would die with him. But had not become chief by avoiding risks. He had become chief by taking the right risks at the right times. "I will do it," he said. "I will meet with your leader alone, but you must come with me, Danny Cole. You are the bridge. You must stand between our worlds." Danny agreed, and they began a plan. 2 hours later, they stood at the edge of the jungle, watching the human shuttle descend through the gray sky. It landed in a clearing half a kilometer away, and a squad of soldiers emerged, their weapons ready and their faces tense. Had left his warriors behind, as promised. Only he and accompanied Danny toward the meeting point. The chief walked with the calm dignity of someone who had nothing to fear, even though Danny knew that was not true. Walked beside her father, her golden eyes scanning the jungle for signs of betrayal. The soldiers saw them coming and raised their weapons. Danny stepped forward, his hands held high. "Stand down," he called out. They are not here to fight, they are here to talk. A man emerged from behind the soldiers. Greg Palmer was shorter than Danny remembered, with gray hair and a face lined with worry. He had been colony administrator for 5 years, and those years had not been kind to him. He looked at Danny, then at the two, and his expression was impossible to read. "Cole," he said, "you look different." Danny glanced down at himself, at the bioluminescent paint that still marked his skin, and the bone ornaments that hung around his neck. He supposed he did look different. "A lot has happened," Danny said. "Palmer, this is chief of the local clan, and this is his daughter. They have come to speak with you." Palmer studied the aliens for a long moment, met his gaze without flinching, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, two leaders who understood the weight of their responsibilities. "Why should I trust you?" Palmer asked, addressing directly. Translated the question and responded. His voice was calm and measured, and translated his words. "You should not trust me. Trust must be earned, and we have done nothing yet to earn yours. But I am here, standing before you without weapons, offering to speak instead of fight. My people have killed your people. Your people have killed mine. We can continue this path until one of us is destroyed, or we can try something different." Palmer listened, his face giving nothing away. "What do you want?" he asked. "We want to survive," said Through. "We have lived on this world for 10,000 years. Your people arrived 2 cycles ago and began taking our land and our resources. We fought back because we did not know what else to do, but fighting will destroy us. You have weapons we cannot match. If we continue this war, we will lose." He paused, and his next words carried the weight of a confession. "Your man, Danny Cole, saved my daughter's life. He did not have to do this. He gained nothing from it, but he chose to help anyway. This tells me that not all humans are enemies. Perhaps some of you can be friends." Palmer turned to Danny. "Is this real? You are telling me that one act of kindness changed everything?" Danny shook his head. "No, one act of kindness opened a door. What happens next depends on us, on all of us." Palmer was silent for a long time. The soldiers behind him shifted nervously, their weapons still raised. The jungle around them was quiet, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Finally, Palmer spoke. "Lower your weapons," he told his soldiers. They hesitated, then obeyed. Palmer stepped forward and extended his hand toward. It was a human gesture of greeting, one that the alien chief could not possibly understand, but had been watching. He had been learning. He reached out with one of his 4 hands and clasped Palmer's in a grip that was surprisingly gentle. "We will talk," Palmer said. "No promises, no guarantees, but we will talk." Nodded, and for the first time since Danny had met him, the chief smiled. It was not peace, not yet, but it was a beginning. And as Danny watched 2 leaders who should have been enemies shake hands in a jungle clearing, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. 6 months had passed since that first meeting in the jungle clearing, and Danny Cole's life had changed in ways he never could have imagined. He was no longer a geological surveyor. The colony had given him a new title, Liaison Officer for Relations. It was a fancy name for a simple job. He spent his days walking between 2 worlds, translating not just words but ideas, helping humans and understand each other. It was the hardest work he had ever done, and also the most important. The peace was fragile, tested daily by old prejudices and new misunderstandings. There were humans who still hated them for the lives they had taken. There were who still feared the humans and their terrible weapons. Every day brought new conflicts, new arguments, new moments when everything seemed about to fall apart. But it held, somehow against all odds it held. Danny had learned more about culture in the past 6 months than the colony had learned in 2 years. He knew their history now, their beliefs, their fears. He knew that they the spirits of their ancestors, and believed that the jungle itself was alive and watching. He knew that they valued courage and compassion above all other virtues, and that saving a life created a bond that could never be broken. He also knew that it had become something more than a translation partner. She had become his closest friend on this strange world. They spent hours together, walking through the jungle or sitting in the colony's meeting rooms, talking about their peoples and their hopes for the future. She taught him her language, and he taught her his. She showed him the secret places of the jungle, the hidden waterfalls and the caves where her people performed their sacred rituals. He showed her the human technology that still amazed her, the computers and the medical equipment and the ships that could fly between the stars. They were different in almost every way, but they understood each other. They were both bridges, standing between two worlds that needed to learn how to coexist. Today, Danny stood at the edge of the wetlands where everything had begun. The quicksand pit was still there, dark and hungry, but it was no longer unmarked. They had placed stone markers around it, carved with symbols that told the story of what had happened here. Stood beside him, her golden eyes reflecting the afternoon light. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not come?" she asked. Danny nodded. "Sometimes. I would have continued my survey. You would have drowned. The war between our peoples would have continued until one side was destroyed. And instead..." Danny looked at the carved stones, at the symbols that told a story of unexpected kindness and its consequences. "And instead we are here, together, trying to build something new." Made a sound that Danny had learned to recognize as laughter. It was strange coming from an alien throat, but it was unmistakably warm. "My father says that you are the most stubborn human he has ever met. He means it as a compliment." Danny smiled. "I will take it as one." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the jungle around them. Birds called in the distance. Insects hummed in the air. The world went on, indifferent to the small dramas of the creatures who lived upon it. "There is something I have not told you," said finally. "Something the ancestors revealed to me in my meditations." Danny turned to look at her. Her face was serious, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with slow, thoughtful patterns. "What is it?" "When I was drowning in the pit," she said, "I called out to the spirits for help, and they answered, but not in the way I expected. They showed me a vision of what was to come. They showed me the future of our two peoples." Danny waited, his heart beating faster. "In the vision," continued, "I saw humans and working together, not as allies of convenience but as true partners. I saw our peoples learning from each other, growing stronger together than either could be alone. I saw a world where the jungle and the colony existed side by side, where the old boundaries had been erased." She paused and her eyes met his. "And at the center of it all, I saw you. A human who chose compassion when hatred would have been easier. A man who became a bridge not because he was forced to, but because he believed it was right." Danny did not know what to say. He was not comfortable with the idea of being chosen by spirits or destined for greatness. He was just a man who had made a choice and lived with the consequences. But looking at the carved stones that marked this place, looking at the world that was slowly changing around him, he began to believe that maybe choices were what made destiny. Maybe the future was not written in the stars, but in the small acts of kindness that people chose to make every day. "I do not know if I can be what you saw," he said honestly. "I am just one person. I cannot change the universe." Smiled, and it was the most human expression he had ever seen on an alien face. "You already have, Danny Cole. You already have." She reached out with one of her 4 hands and placed it over his heart. He could feel the warmth of her scaled skin through his shirt. "The ancestors chose well," she said, "and I am grateful that they sent you to save me." Danny covered her hand with his own. Two species, two worlds, connected by a moment of choice in a jungle clearing. "I am grateful too," he said, "for everything that came after." They stood together at the edge of the wetlands as the sun began to set over 4, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Behind them, the jungle stretched endlessly, full of mysteries and dangers. Ahead of them, the future waited, uncertain but full of possibility. Danny Cole had come to this moon to dig in the dirt and file reports. He had never expected to become a bridge between civilizations, a friend to aliens, a small but important part of a story much larger than himself. But that was the thing about choices. They led to places you could never have imagined. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, they led somewhere worth going. He looked at the alien who had become his friend, and he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. 2 bridges, standing side by side, connecting 2 worlds that were only beginning to learn how much they needed each other. The jungle darkened around them, and the first stars appeared in the evening sky. Danny pointed upward, toward the distant lights. "Somewhere out there," he said, "there are billions of stars, and around those stars there are probably billions of worlds. And on those worlds there might be billions of species, all struggling to understand each other." Followed his gaze, her golden eyes reflecting the starlight. "Then perhaps what we are doing here matters more than we know," she said. Perhaps this small world, this small piece, is the beginning of something much greater. Danny nodded. Maybe. Or maybe it is just two peoples learning to be neighbors. Either way, I think it is worth the effort. Made that strange sound that was her version of laughter. Stubborn human, she said, and there was affection in her voice. Determined, Danny corrected her. There is a difference. She smiled, and together they walked back toward the colony, leaving the quicksand pit behind them but carrying its lesson with them always. Some bridges were built with stone and steel. Others were built with nothing more than a choice, a helping hand, and the stubborn belief that two strangers could become something more. Danny Cole had built such a bridge, and he would spend the rest of his life defending it. It was, he decided, a life worth living.